All right, Amit, I'm super excited about our next guest.
Yeah, at last.
I see what you did there.
At last, we have somebody pretty special in the box. Who have we got in the box?
Dr. Guy Weinberg from Chicago, who has, as you know, been an innovator, a thought leader, and the pioneer of what I think is the biggest advance in acute care medicine in the last 20 years. Prove me wrong.
I can't prove you wrong. I think you're right. And without your contributions to science and to patient care, I think we'd be in a very different place.
Yeah.
Guy, we are of course talking about Guy Weinberg. Guy, welcome to the podcast. Thank you so much for taking the time to join us.
Thanks for the invitation.
Welcome.
We look up to you with great respect, and it was a great honor for me. First time we were talking about this when I saw you on Wednesday or Thursday. First time I met Guy was at the ESRA World Meeting, I believe, in 2018. And I was there getting selfies. I was with Kareem El-Baghdadi and Alan McFarlane. We were getting all these pictures because it's great. Tell us what you're up to now. Yeah.
First of all, thanks for the invitation. And I'm so jealous of you guys. What an amazing position you have. How lucky you are to be talking with all these interesting people.
Yeah.
I mean, what's better than conversation? This is the highest form of human interaction. You get to do all the best people. Not that I would be in that category, but you get a chance to select who you want to speak with and the most interesting people in the community to chit chat with.
Absolutely.
Wonderful.
Yeah.
So,
I mean, it was
great
people were
gig.
saying last night, like, oh, what a long day you had in the box. I'm like, but you don't understand. We were just chit-chatting with
we're just
like,
talking to
really
friends.
interesting people. Yeah,
it's the best.
Yeah.
Okay, so what am I doing now? I am a little bit superannuated, and I stopped seeing patients about 2 years ago,
Okay.
and I really miss that part of practice, but I'm still adhering closely to the academic mission.
Okay.
So I'm involved in research, and I would say that's really the thing that I would circle and underline. And that includes not just anesthesia-related research, and I'll tell you a little bit about what I'm contemplating most recently, but also separate from that, I'm very interested in sort of a cancer research as well. And so I have a conference that I host every year in Telluride in Colorado, usually in the summer, and on two very interesting genes involved in cancer that I've been working on for a number of years. Next year will be our 10th anniversary, and this is probably the thing that I am most proud of having done, which is this workshop that has brought together leaders in this field of cancer research from all over the world. And it's a kind of a small niche in terms of the genetics, but a very broad reach in terms of the diseases that are affected by these two genes that I'm interested in. So that's part of what I'm doing. Then in addition to the academic side, I also I am an entrepreneur, and I have a small startup. And the simplest way to explain that is that I am trying to standardize the treatment which we recognize as the standard of care for local anesthetic toxicity. And I have a kit in front of the FDA now that we're trying to get approval for Lipid Rescue. And as you probably know, it may be standard of care for treatment of local anesthetic toxicity, but it is not FDA approved for that purpose. And we're trying to gain FDA approval on that.
It's not FDA approved?
It is not FDA approved. And that's just because no one has, the market is too small to attract big pharma to get FDA approval, which requires effort and
big investment.
And a big investment, as you well know. So what I've done is standardize a kit so that everyone in the country could treat in the same way. And what this would do is allow us to study it more completely, because right now everyone is doing essentially what they want within the guidelines that are published, but everybody's version is a little bit different. So there's no way that you could really study in terms of an RCT, because of the heterogeneity of treatment is a massive confounder. So you would never be able to pull really good stats because everyone is choosing a different treatment.
Right.
Once that is standardized, and to put simply, standardizing the standard of care, then we can study it.
Now, what's in the kit?
So the kit is And this is a conflict, so I'll just mention
Yeah,
that.
yeah,
I'm
sure.
a founder
Yeah.
and officer and shareholder of a company called Rescue Pharma, RESQ, and the kit contains a lipid emulsion,
Okay.
a soy-based lipid emulsion. It also contains a purpose-built administration set that we call ResFlow, and it has one-way valves so that flow is always in the correct direction. It has a 1.2 micron filter, which is an FDA recommended safety feature,
Yeah.
and it's inline, so you don't. And then it's needleless, so you wouldn't. You can deliver both
yeah.
the bolus and the infusion without having to reiterate a needle onto a syringe and aspirating from a bag.
Because that's what we're doing right
multiple
now.
times.
Yeah.
Right.
Sharp
Drawing
needle
up.
into the bag, drawing up and meanwhile, someone's doing chest compression. So
Yeah.
a lot's happening. It's not the risk for a needle incident is high.
It is very high.
Yeah.
And I know that in these situations, the few times that I've had to treat local anesthetic toxicity, clearly needle stick was a risk for me and the patient. But more importantly, there was a delay. I don't know about you, but the last time I saw an event in person, it was a little bit of a drill. I mean, nobody really, I stood by and watched to kind of get a sense of how people would respond, and there was a lot of chaos. And so part of the goal of the kit would be to reduce the chaos. Now, I'm not really here to talk about that and promote that, so I don't really want to.
But it's interesting that you're doing that. I think
one
that's
of the problems is, and we talked about emergencies with Amanda Kumar, who was on our ESRA episode, and how it's useful to have cognitive aids. But one of the problems is it's very difficult to remember in an emergency, what do I need to do? How much do I need to give? And then, drawing up boluses. So I can see the potential value in that. I can see.
So let me give you a good example, and this was a real eye-opener to me. I was participating in some sessions at the ASA over many years, and they would always have me in the room for the local anesthetic event simulation. So it's always number one, it's a tip-off to anybody in the room what's going to be happening.
Weinberg's here. It's going to be last.
Exactly. And the one thing that I could say really differentiated and made a difference between the really good outcomes and the mannequins that made it, the mannequins that didn't, was a cognitive aids, and especially a reader. If you had a reader at the foot of the bed, and this was an eye-opener, so from then on I realized when you are in a chest compression situation, whatever the cause, it doesn't matter if it's last or some other thing, you need somebody at the foot of the bed reading off what to do, because it just made all the difference. If you're relying on people in the middle of that event to remember everything, all of the different items.
Adrenaline causes this block in cognitive processing, and you're like,
Did you
We've
see
all
the
been there.
video that Jeff produced, the little YouTube short? So he produced a short around one of the Blocktobers, right, about how to treat local anaesthetic systemic
I did see
toxicity.
that.
And it actually was really
Excellent.
practical, it was like short information.
Yes.
But even then, you're not going to go on YouTube or Instagram to search at the time. So sometimes you need to have something, a printable card, so that somebody can read it out. So are we going to let Guy go without talking a bit about how he came about Lipid Rescue? What do you think? Do you think we can go there? Should we ask a bit about that?
Yeah.
Well,
How did it start?
Well, first of all, we'll keep that part short, because what I really would love to talk about is amazing ESRA meetings and how.
Well, we can start with that.
okay.
Why don't we start with that?
Okay, because one of the greatest things about my career in academic medicine has been the opportunity for all the amazing people I've met, like you, Amit, and you, Jeff. Jeff and I first met at in Rome at an ESRA event in Rome.
That's right.
And as somebody who loves to travel and loves meeting people, this was just it's my life's breath and blood to come to ESRA, because it's always held in really amazing places, and of course we're in Oslo. This is a bucket lister for me, just to be here, of course. So it was quite remarkable to get the invitation. Always happy to come to ESRA, and especially all the amazing places they've been, Bilbao and Bordeaux, and all the amazing people that I get to meet. It's wonderful.
It's a great meeting.
Now for the what I would recommend, if people are really interested in the full story of the discovery, there's a link to the Severing House lecture that I gave in 2022. And that really goes from A to Z in terms of and the full in-depth background of how what happened in the studies, because as you might know, the discovery was completely unexpected.
Yeah.
And I don't like to say that it was a mistake, but it basically was a mistake.
Serendipity, maybe.
Serendipity. Thank you.
Okay,
That's
yeah.
a more positive tone. And but it was an unexpected finding in that I had prepared designed an experiment to test a hypothesis on the underlying mechanism of local anesthetic toxicity at the time, because I was working under the assumption that it was a mitochondrial effect, which I believe there's very strong evidence to point to that as an important part of the toxidrome. And the theory that I had at the time predicted that flooding cells with lipid would exacerbate the toxicity, and so that a way to prove, since I was unable to at the time establish a model of mitochondrial deficiency that would prove this hypothesis, I was going to create it biochemically by flooding the zone with lipid, and that would create more toxicity, and they would be very sensitive to bupivacaine. But as my wife will tell you, she and I were having lunch one day, and I got a call from the lab. Dr. Weinberg, we did your experiment, and we gave lipid, and then we were unable to kill the animals with bupivacaine. I'm like, what? Uh-oh. So that was, my life flashed in front of me, and I realized it was the future life, not the past life. And I'm like, uh-oh, now I've got to change all of my science and work on something completely different.
Yeah.
But you know what's really weird is that I went another 5 years before I did another study, because I was so focused on still this mitochondrial mechanism that I was not pursuing lipid resuscitation, because it was at that point a parlor trick that worked in the laboratory, but never expected it would be clinically translated. And then of course Meg Rosenblatt did the clinical translation after the publication of the second paper in 2004, and that kind of opened now we have the translational floodgates open.
Yeah.
And I said, okay, now I've got to completely stop the mechanisms research I'm doing that I was very interested in. It's very reductionist but not clinically applicable, and I better start studying the clinical use of lipid.
How do we save lives with this?
Right, and so what I immediately did was switch gears. I did reluctantly, but now I have to do it because it apparently works clinically. We better do something. So thank you, Meg, for completely disrupting my research. And I switched gears to, the first thing I did was to compare lipid to standard ACLS in an animal model of local anesthetic-induced toxicity. And what we found was that the lipid works, and the effects of adrenaline were very short-lived. The benefit was not really there. And vasopressin, which at the time was in competition with epi as the lead adjuvant to ACLS, completely destroyed the animals' chances of recovery.
Right.
So vasopressin's out, adrenaline not so much, and lipid really was the way to go.
The thing,
and so we published a couple of papers looking at that. I just point out that at roughly the same time, the AAGBI, and I'm going to mention John Pickard, Tim Meeks, who's our UK president now, hi Tim, and Nigel Bedforth, amazing people all, and they called me up and said, we need to put together the same kind of recommendations as for MH, so that people have a way to treat it, because we all know what to do with MH, but what do we do for LAS? So there wasn't at that point in 2010 a standardized recommendation. So I worked together with them and put together the AAGBI recommendations in 2010, and then shortly thereafter Rick Rosenquist, who was president at ESRA, called me and said, well, we need to do one for the US. And so even though UK was ahead of us, we did it for the US, and that was that.
So that was the, sorry to interrupt you, Jeff, that was the first time I heard your name. I was attending as a delegate a workshop or a seminar day at the Association of Anaesthetists, or as it was then, the AAGBI, and John Pickard was talking. And he talked about you, he mentioned you by name, and then I heard William Harrop Griffiths talking about you. I was like, wow. So I heard about him, heard about his fame, just I was at the beginning of my regional anesthesia journey, and then you can imagine how excited I was when I met him. So thank you for your contribution to the world of regional anesthesia resuscitation.
Well, I had to say, and I have to say thank you to William Harrop Griffiths too. He was also instrumental there. I have to mention him too.
Now, Guy, I want to be being recorded. This is being broadcast to millions, if not billions, of people right
course.
now across the world. Why shouldn't we mix local
Oh,
anesthetics?
for God's sake.
That's a great
so evil. Were you planning that from the beginning?
Of course.
Wow.
That's a great question, and you know, and I'll say this, that it's so funny. If you are trained to mix, even when you realize that mixing is irrational and dangerous and ineffective, you will still continue to mix.
Yeah.
You do what you're raised to do. I don't care who you are.
That's a true.
When they say sit, good dog, and paw, you do those things. you know.
This is a stitch up. Where's the camera? This has all been set up.
I promise I didn't set this up ahead of time.
No, but it's true. So you probably know that I had to give that lecture. I think it was at the last ESRA in Paris.
I think we talked about it ahead of your lecture, right?
Right, and everybody you talk to in the know can give you the 6 reasons it's a bad idea.
Yeah.
But everybody I know basically still does it. No, it's clearly it's problematic.
I think we'll just draw a line under that conversation.
Yeah.
But before we go, there was something you shared with us, which is a recent publication, which is really
I want to mention
interesting.
this. Yeah.
So, you guys have given us the treatment algorithm for local anesthetic systemic toxicity. We have databases, we've got places where we can report things. So we would expect, now that we have the information, now we have the reporting, that deaths from local anesthetic systemic toxicity would just drop and disappear, and it should not be as much of a problem. Is that the case?
So thank you for queuing that up, setting me up. We have some very interesting data that we've published in 2 papers, one in RAPM and one in British Journal of Anesthesia. And here I want to give credit to the lead and senior authors, Michael Fettyplace, who's basically done all of the heavy lifting for these papers, and Marina Getman, who's been a very important colleague for both of us, and I'd be happy to say both of them are protégés of mine, and really outstanding clinician scientists, both of them. So Michael's idea was exactly that. Let's compare the outcomes and frequency of reports and deaths from local anesthetics over a period of time, comparing the decade before to the decade after the AAGBI and ESRA recommendations were published. So that was in 2010. And what we found was quite surprising, and I'm going to give you a 2-point summary, and then one of these is a take-home that you can use to trick your residents with. So the summary is this: peripheral nerve blocks as a cause of local anesthetic events and fatalities essentially did drop off for the non-lidocaine local anesthetics, meaning ropivacaine, bupivacaine, levobupivacaine, almost completely to 0. I mean, they completely disappeared as a cause of fatalities related to local anesthetic toxicity.
That's good.
That's excellent.
Yay.
That's a good start.
That's a great start. However, that's true for non-lidocaine local anesthetics. For lidocaine, fatalities and events have gone up since 2010. And now I can tell you that lidocaine is the most dangerous local anesthetic. Isn't that mind-blowing? Now, you just ask any resident, what's the most dangerous local anesthetic? And every anesthesiologist and every resident in training will tell you it's bupivacaine. And that's something we all know. It's like...
Can I ask you, do you have that sort of broken down in terms of route of administration? Because I'll tell you, I got a bias here. Well, I will let you tell me.
Okay. It's not anesthesiologists anymore.
Whoa.
Yeah.
So all the fatalities and reports of last events are coming from either outside of the OR, so in the ED, especially infusions of lidocaine, or when they're in the OR, it's surgeons giving local anesthetic.
Really?
Are you
Mostly lidocaine.
With or without the presence of an anesthesiologist, or you don't know that information?
That I'm not aware of, but it's surgeons.
Yeah.
And it may, in those cases, it's not just lidocaine; it's also bupivacaine, ropivacaine.
They're mixing it up together.
Right.
So,
but
anesthetists
Hold on a
and
second.
anesthesiologists.
They're mixing it up together. I'm just
stop
yeah.
it.
There's more mixing.
Okay, you
There's
won
more
the
mixing.
debate. You're great. Yeah.
Hey, how about high volume liposuction solutions.
Because people are doing this
Tumescent, because
anesthesia.
they're using like 70 milligrams per kilogram of lidocaine.
Right. So the problem we run into here is that every surgeon, of course, conflates their own personal experience with statistical relevance. So if they've done 200 cases and they've never had a problem, they say, well, I've never had a problem. This doesn't exist.
Right.
Well, as the rule of threes will tell you, well, okay, so now you're at a rate of probably a lower frequency than 1 in 1,000, but that doesn't mean that it's entirely safe when you are talking about a procedure that's done tens of thousands, if not hundreds of thousands of times annually in the U.S. and globally. And of course, there are good data to suggest that these overdoses, if you will, of even highly dilute local anesthetic are not safe, especially, we'll say, in patients with comorbidities. So it's not, you could have perfect practice.
So we can't ignore renal failure, heart failure.
No, of course. Of course, these things set patients up.
What about, because we were talking to Karim El-Bogdadli yesterday about high-dose topical lidocaine. Have you got any case reports of local anaesthetic systemic toxicity from this?
Yes. It's dangerous because if you use just think of this, if you're doing 4% lidocaine on the mucosal surface, that all goes intravascular and quickly.
Yeah.
Now, not only have I seen that personally, but let me tell you an experience that I think is educational, and that was a patient who the code team was called to see in a recovery room, full-on code, following an ENT procedure, and the patient died.
Oh, God.
I will tell you that at no point during this resuscitation in the recovery room did anyone ask or mention whether or not the patient had received local anesthetic, because it was an ENT procedure, and
they didn't think about blocks. They were like, no block yet.
And that patient had received a large dose of lidocaine, high concentration topical, for airway protection, not
to
protection,
secure the airway. Yeah.
Right. Well, just to numb the airway, and for this procedure. And so that was only discovered after the event. So the bottom line is twofold. Number one, yes, topical local anesthetic is dangerous, no doubt. And number two, when you're called to a code, it makes sense in-house, at least just to ask, was this patient exposed to local anesthetics? Because there's an antidote, an effective treatment. And if you resuscitate the patient or fail to resuscitate them and haven't asked that question, and the patient did receive local, it's a problem. So something to think about.
So we, as anesthesiologists, we're doing okay with local anesthetic systemic toxicity treatment and outcomes.
And prevention.
But lidocaine is not doing so well.
Generally.
Yes.
People think it's safe. They say, oh, I've got this syringe, a big fat syringe in my hand, but it's lidocaine. What could happen?
Yeah, been using it for 75 years. Yeah.
I think it's not what you'd expect to see, right?
Exactly.
Not what you, so thank you so much for sharing that with us.
Yeah.
Thank you so much for sharing the time with us.
Guy, thanks
great.
so much.
It was great.
Yeah,
Jeff,
appreciate
it's
it.
great. Amit, great to see you guys both. Thanks so much.